What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host, as always. Very excited about today because I am joined by a very special guest, Mr. Sheil Kapadia of The Ringer. Hopefully, you know him from Extra Point Taken. If not, you might recognize him from some athletic betting content back in the day with him and Nate Tice. Was a huge fan of that particular segment. So pumped to have Sheil on today. And Sheil, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I just rushed. We had a kids softball game, as I was telling you, and I just rushed up to take a shower and then came back down. So I kind of feel like the athlete, the NFL player who just showered in the locker room and is dressed, but he's like drenched in sweat. So this is the closest I'll sort of get to, that type of experience. But good to be on with you.
Yeah, excited to talk about some Chargers football with Sheil today. Should be a lot of fun. As always, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. You can get a deposit match up to $100 over at prizepicks.com/guilty. Okay, Sheil, so we've had a bit of time to settle on the NFL draft. I know as the president of team content, you were a big fan of the idea of adding Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze to the Chargers, pairing them with Justin Herbert. But now that you've had some time to sit on things, what are your thoughts on the Joe Alt pick that they ultimately selected a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I get it for sure. It's never like, oh, you always take the wide receiver or you always take the offensive tackle. I mean, I'm sure you guys have discussed it. We've seen it. The Lions end up with Penei Sewell. They're very happy to have, maybe the best young offensive lineman in the NFL. The Bengals end up with Jamar Chase. I'm sure they're very happy to have one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL. So it's a hard decision. It's not one, as I was going through the draft and preparing for the Extra Point Taken that we were doing, like I was at a point where I'm like, do I go all in and be like, the Chargers are making a mistake? They should have gone with Malik Neighbors. And I just couldn't get there because if they would have taken a tight end or something else, then yeah, I would have had that take. But I believe offensive efficiency is the way to sustain success in the NFL. And so how do you do that? Quarterback, offensive line, and pass catchers. And so I loved Neighbors just in the pre-draft process. I was like, this guy looks like he could be Antonio Brown to me. He's so young. He's tearing up the SEC. Like I just, you know how it is. Sometimes you're doing draft stuff and you fall in love with the player, which I make fun of teams for. I tell them never fall in love. But when we're doing it for content, I'm allowed to fall in love. And so I still will be monitoring it where I'll be looking at it. And if Neighbors is tearing it up through 6 weeks, I'll be going, oh my gosh, I wish I could have watched this guy play with Justin Herbert for 8 years or so. But Alt is a fantastic prospect. He's a clean prospect. He checked all the boxes you want in terms of production, size, athleticism, age, premium position. So totally fine with the pick. Now they've kind of shored up that offensive line, and now they can take their time a little bit in terms of building those pass catchers around Herbert.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of the fan base agreed with you and wanted, Malik Neighbors or even Rome Odunze. It was definitely more geared towards Malik Neighbors. Yeah. But now that people have had some time to see like the ultimate result, I think people are generally cool with the way that the draft panned out. I'm curious to get your thoughts here because Adam Schefter went on the Pat McAfee show and was saying that the Giants' calls to trade up was not for a quarterback, it was for Joe Alt, and that they were trying to do the whole like JJ McCarthy at 6 thing to try to get Joe Alt to fall to them. I don't know if you caught that or not, but what are your thoughts about like kind of the way the league viewed Joe Alt?
Yeah, I actually didn't know about that until you sent me the rundown. And then I was like, oh, that's an interesting report. Now I think Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, his information was different. And he said, no, they wanted to go up for Drake May. And if they didn't get Drake May, they were going to kind of stay put. But I think probably most teams in the NFL had Alt as their top offensive lineman available. I mean, there were so many guys in the first round that I'm sure there were some boards that said, no, we like one of these other guys. He just felt to me like the guy with the least amount of questions, not to keep coming back to the age thing, but I do think it matters sometimes. It's like, all right, if one guy's dominating and I think he's 21 years old, I believe, and another guy's doing it at 23 years old when he's had 2 more years in a college program's weight room and he's playing against players who are younger, like, that does, it's not everything, but it is a factor to me. So yeah, Alt had everything I was looking for. I think the league viewed him as certainly a top prospect and again, played a premium position. So those are the guys that tend to go pretty high. And if you're a Chargers fan, hopefully you're just like, man, you've invested. I mean, I was just going through the depth chart today. It's like, well, it's rare. 3 first-round picks in what is it, 4 years on the offensive line. Like, you better have a freaking good offensive line now. Like, that's a lot of, you're using those resources, and I'm all for investing in the offensive line. But man, we better be talking about this offensive line in 2024 and being like, all right, this is at least a top 5, top 8 unit, and now they can figure out the other parts of the roster.
Yeah, to your point, there were 3 first-round offensive linemen that the team had taken in like the first 40 years of the franchise, and now it's 3 in 4 years. So it's again, some of that is Jim Harbaugh, right? Some of that is the previous regime and just how bad the offensive line was under Anthony Lynn, and Brandon Staley, for all of his faults, did come in and say, hey, like, we're going to prioritize offensive line talent and development. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. From an offensive line perspective, we are excited about that group, but a lot of people do have question marks about the wide receiver room. Obviously, the Chargers added Ladd McConkey on day 2. They signed DJ Chark officially today. They drafted 2 receivers in the 7th round, and they're still reportedly meeting with Marquez Valdes-Scantling today. So now that we've moved on from the Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors conversation, what's your take on how they have kind of handled the wide receiver room in the post Keenan Allen and Mike Williams world?
It really feels like when Harbaugh and Ortiz took over, it was like the understanding that this is not a 1-year fix. I mean, there were some messes to clean up there. There were some hard decisions to make. Obviously, if you could keep Keenan Allen, at a lower price, you would love to do that. But, he's well within his right to say, no, thank you. Someone else will pay me this salary and go ahead and trade me. And so I think we have to look at the Chargers through that lens, that this isn't like just come in, you've got the quarterback, you're going to win the Super Bowl next year with Jim Harbaugh. And I think they understand that. So having said that, what you see smart teams do when they have an area of need and they don't have easy answers is dart throw, dart throw, dart throw, dart throw. Hopefully something hits. I like Ladd McConkey for sure. I think he profiles to me as a quarterback friendly wide receiver, someone who can get open, separate, yards after the catch, has speed to make plays down the field. So I like that pick. I thought that was a good pick. Ideally, he's a guy with Herbert for many years to come and is catching, has 100 catch seasons in his future. It doesn't mean that's definitely going to happen. We all know the draft is hard, and we can all name our teams and or busts we've been like so sure about in the past. And so he's had the back and the ankle injuries, and he didn't have like tremendous production in college, and he's a little smaller. So hopefully he works out for them. I'm sure you guys talk about Quentin Johnson quite a bit. I mean, talk about a guy who, man, if he can figure it out, if they can get something out of him, then it's just going to make the room look a lot better. So he's someone who's obviously a key player for them. And then the other guys, Josh Palmer, DJ Chark, the rookies they got, it's like you kind of just need someone. So it's not a great group. If I was going through and ranking all the pass catching groups in the NFL, I'm trying to, think off the top of my head. I think it's, definitely bottom 10, I would say. But they do have a couple of younger players where you say, all right, sometimes those guys emerge and it looks a little bit better. So that's kind of where I am with that group as a whole.
Yeah, it feels like, excuse me, it feels like a group that is a bunch of complementary pieces, which again, kind of given their resources, that's kind of where they were at. Next year's draft is apparently, again, this is always the conversation, right? Like next year's, it's so hard to predict, but next year's draft supposedly has like 4 or 5 like really awesome tight ends and another great receiver class. So it does feel like next year maybe they can kind of drop in their number one target of sorts and maybe figure out that problem next year, because like you hinted, this isn't a just 1-year turnaround. This isn't a roster that's ready to win right now. And so like having that long-term vision, I think, is really crucial about how to look at this team.
And the other good thing is, I think that's absolutely right. If you hit on McConkey this year and then you add a guy next year, it's like at this time next year, you're saying, all right, it looks a lot better. And you've got the offensive line, and you've got Herbert in the second year in his system. You've got all those things. And the other good thing about the dart throws that they have with McConkey and Quentin Johnson and even the day 3 picks, it's like everybody's on a rookie contract. And we're seeing what some of these wide receivers who you're saying, Gabe Davis got how much money? Calvin Ridley got how much money? Not to those guys to catch strays, in case they're listening, but you know what I'm saying here with the wide. It's hard basically to add wide receivers in free agency. It's really draft or trade are the 2 ways where you're waiting for someone to be unhappy, a Stephon Diggs and AJ Brown and Tyreek, like something like that. Then you make a trade and you acquire a guy, or you draft a guy and you hit on them. And so, that's the good thing, where if those players do hit, you're not paying them a lot of money, and you have that money to add other players on the roster.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. The other position group that I'm curious to get your take on here is the running back room. There was a lot of, would the Chargers take Blake Corum conversations? Would they sign a big money free agent running back because Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, they want to run the football. So that's not really how they went about it. They signed Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins on pretty cheap, and then they drafted a 6th-round pick from Troy, Kamani Bilal. What are your thoughts of, did they do enough to kind of overhaul that room, or do you think they kind of might need another piece in free agency, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm generally with the nerds on the whole, running back conversation, where, if you don't have to spend a lot of money, don't spend a lot of money. And especially for a team like the Chargers, where it's like they had needs on this roster. They had to be pretty, like strict with where they were going to spend and how they were going to spend with the resources they had at their disposal. So yeah, honestly, I would have ripped them if they would have spent big money on a running back this offseason. I would have been like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't the way to do it. So, Greg Roman can design a run game. We know that. He's done that everywhere he's gone. So that's encouraging if you're a Chargers fan. Now, I am kind of curious because he has, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, always had the quarterback as a running threat, from Kaepernick to Tyrod Taylor to Lamar Jackson. And Justin Herbert, he can keep it and run a little bit. I don't think that's really how you want to use him. So it's a little bit different here. But man, the bar to clear is so low. They were 32nd in rushing DVOA last year. They could not do anything on the ground. And so I feel like, you can, with Gus Edwards and, who knows, with J.K. Dobbins and the rookie, like, can you get just like an average? Can you get like the 21st best running game in the NFL with this group? Especially like we just talked about, you've invested in the offensive line. Like, this is how modern NFL is supposed to work. If you have if you have the offensive line, if you have the scheme, and you have just adequate running backs, there should be opportunities for them to make plays. So again, if we're going, hey, Sheil, rank all the 32 running back rooms in the NFL, this one's going to, I said bottom 10 for wide receivers. This one might be bottom 5, even though I do like Gus Edwards. But at the same time, I think there's enough there around those guys where they can be successful.
Yeah, I think for us, it was always tough last year because whenever, like, the first game they come out and run for like 230 yards on the Dolphins, and it's like, man, like Kellen Moore, like he's really going to do a lot of great things, with the run game as he promised. And then Austin Eckler gets injured, and he never really like got himself back to that previous form. And it was like, okay, run game plan is gone. Like, we're not doing it anymore. And that's just, it feels like this regime is really going to prioritize having other plans than, hey, Justin, go throw the ball 55 times and win us some games that way, which he can do, but not, it's a tough way to live, as you've kind of experienced with some of the quarterbacks in Philadelphia, whether that's Carson Wentz or whoever. But in today's NFL, if you can't run the football, it's hard to ask your quarterback to throw that many times every single week.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see how this works with Greg Roman. Like he's in Baltimore and he becomes everyone's punching bag, and everyone's blaming all their issues on him. And I would sometimes be like, I don't know, they've had some pretty good offenses. Like, when Lamar Jackson is healthy, the offense has worked a lot with Greg Roman. Now, people, a lot of people will point to kind of the passing game stuff. And so now with the Chargers, like, I feel good about what they're going to scheme up in the running game with Harbaugh and Greg Roman. Like, those are guys in that offensive line. You have guys who know what they're doing. And to your point, can take stuff off of Justin Herbert's plate. Even, the one of the best arguments I've heard from like people in the NFL for running the ball, because again, I'm kind of, modern and, I'll throw the ball more. But one of the best arguments I've heard is like, sometimes the quarterback needs a breather. Like, that made so much sense to me, especially some of these guys who are asked to do so much, who are doing stuff pre-snap and have a lot of control. Hey, change the play, set the protections, get this guy lined up. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. Make sure the play clock doesn't wind down. Oh, and by the way, that's all before the ball's even snapped. And then the ball is snapped and your right tackle's not very good. And you got to maneuver the pocket and you got to make a pinpoint throw to a wide receiver who's not that fast. I'm like, that makes sense to me. Sometimes give that guy a break and, figure out a way to hand the football off. And, it might not always get you 8 yards, 10 yards, but it's like, all right, that's fine. Run into good looks. Don't run into bad looks. And kind of go from there. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel. But yeah, the Roman thing is really interesting to me this season, whether it's like, all right, with Harbaugh by his side, they're going to be able to figure out the passing game stuff and really have built a great offense, or is this going to be in November? You poor guys are going to be on here going, "Oh my gosh, no, let's have a Ravens writer on to tell us what went wrong in Baltimore and if the same thing's happening here." So it really is a big time storyline.
Yeah, I think one of the more curious things that we are looking forward to hearing, just kind of how training camp undergoes, is what is Marcus Brady's role in all of this, because they made a clear pitch to him to be able to hire him to as the passing game coordinator, and the Ravens never really had that kind of role, at least not a guy like Marcus Brady, who once was considered like a rising star in the profession. So for us, that's like a real curiosity. He had in his first press conference a little comment that he might be like a little bit more involved in play calling than previously considered. And Harbaugh has kind of had that split previously with the 49ers before. So that is something that we are going to monitor closely during training camp to see if Marcus Brady is super involved or if he's just like normal passing game coordinator and just kind of hanging around in the background.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then it is still like Jim Harbaugh is the coach and he was a quarterback and like he knows about offensive football. It's not
Yeah.
like it's not just, hey, hand the keys to Greg Roman and let him do whatever he wants. Like Jim Harbaugh's going to have his own ideas of how the whole thing should work and how it can work. So I that's why I'm like, all right, I think it has a chance to succeed here. We'll see where I am in August or September. Like you said, monitor what's happening in training camp. How does it look? How do the wide receivers look? And figure it out then. But I think it has a chance to succeed.
Yeah, that's totally fair. We'll shift gears here to talk about the defense really quickly here. I was really curious to get your take on Jesse Minter and like what success will look like for him in year one, because we've kind of talked about like the roster disadvantages, but he's also at Michigan, or previously he's never had a Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Tuli Tuipulotu is a rising young pass rusher as well. There's Derwin James, but outside of those four, there's not a ton of proven talent here. So for you on the outside looking in, how would you kind of define what success could look like for Jesse Minter in his first season in the NFL as a defensive coordinator?
I think probably two things. I think one is competency. When you whatever rankings you like to look at the end of the season, whether it's DVOA or, EPA or success rate, whatever kind of numbers you're into looking at, even scoring defense. Like I feel like there's enough there to get to the middle of the pack. It's like, I don't think they're going to be a top 10 defense, but I think they can be competent there. And then the big thing, and it's a big thing I feel like with defensive coordinators now, is like, I want a couple games during the season where the nerds are just like, oh my, did you see what Jesse meant? Oh my gosh, how did he come up with? Because that's really what defensive football, in my opinion, is about now in 2024. It's like those game specific plans against great quarterbacks and great offenses. Do you have something? Do you have something that makes them pause a little bit, that allows your defense to steal a couple of possessions, that allows you to show something that was not scouted, that you didn't show on film previously? Can you teach those things? And I'm excited to see Jesse Minter. I mean, I thought, the Eagles had we do our Philly special pod, and they had a defensive coordinator opening. And I was like, when you're doing your list, I'm like, this guy's resume is impressive. He's coached in the NFL. He's coached in college. He seems to be innovative. You can't argue with the results at Michigan. So, I think, they obviously have big question marks at cornerback. They're unsettled at defensive tackle. It's not the greatest roster, but it's not, totally, the cupboard's not completely bare. You hope Junior Colson, that should be, as far as rookie transitions go, a pretty, easy one. You're playing for the guy you played for in college, and it should be a similar scheme. Like, they know each other well. So yeah, I think, like I said, middle of the pack, but also some flashes that kind of get you excited as fans, where you say, okay, this guy, once we fill some of those holes on the roster, this thing has a chance to be pretty good.
Yeah, you guys on the Extra Point Taken always talk about doing more with less, and like, he was the defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt, but then he goes to Michigan where the cupboards were completely stacked, right? And so it is going to be interesting to see what this defensive coaching staff and Jesse Minter can do with these guys. What can you get out of a Christian Fulton who hasn't really worked out? What can you get out of these day 3 draft picks? What can you get out of Puno Ford, who's kind of bounced around the league? So that's going to be one for you guys to monitor too. From a more with less standpoint, what can Jesse
Yeah.
Minter do? Is this a guy that could be on the head coaching track record in the near future here?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if he coaches really well and then Mike McDonald is successful in Seattle, things change so quick. It's like a year from now, we could be talking about something totally different, but you're right. I mean, if we're looking ahead, that is possible. A year from now, we're talking about him in that respect. And yeah, defensive coordinators, especially, it's like, you're usually not going to have the most stacked. Like every defense, I feel like has some holes. Some are very talented where they can just line up and play. But most of these guys, they're going to have to figure it out. Hey, how do we hide this guy? How do we mask this weakness? How do we make the quarterback hold on to the football for an extra half second? It comes down to all those things.
Yeah, very, very true. All right, a couple more questions here before we let you go, Sheil. We really appreciate the time. Zooming out here, post-draft, free agency. If you had to circle like one big question mark on the roster, maybe this is like a post, a summer signing. Maybe this is like a mid-season trade or some kind of deal, which will be new for Chargers fans because it's never been on the table before. But now Joe Ortiz is very open to that. So if you had to circle in one position group that's like, hey, like I do have, I need to see some more bodies in here. Where would you kind of lean towards there?
I mean, the one that I have the biggest question marks about that is going to have the biggest impact is wide receiver, which we already talked about. And I just there's probably not going to be a whole lot you can do. Now, maybe, I mean, who knows? Brandon Ayuk, maybe there would be something. I won't rule it out completely. Maybe in the middle of the season, the Chargers get off to a great start and there's another team with a great wide receiver on the last year of his contract and you trade for someone like that. But that's the big one to me. I would feel a lot better if there was just, one more guy on there that I could say, all right, I know what I'm getting from this guy. And then everyone else is a complementary piece rather than sort of more unknowns and more complementary pieces. So that's one. And then the other one would probably be corner. I mean, you can correct me if you feel differently, but just looking at the depth chart there, you say, all right, what are you getting from Christian Fulton? What are you getting from Asante Samuel Jr. in this scheme? So that's another one where I would look at. But honestly, a lot of teams are probably like that at corner. You look at a lot of depth charts and it's like, ooh, okay, you might have one guy you like, you might have an older guy, you might have an injured guy. And so I don't think they're that unique in that respect. Yeah,
not every team gets to go draft Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean in the same year and just, figure it out right on the fly.
After they, played two guys 33 years old. So yeah, hey, you didn't have to, Eagles fans would say, well, you didn't have to watch these guys play last year. So yeah, no, it's, sometimes you get lucky and you can attack, but who knows? I mean, those guys might not be, they might not be that good. We don't know. It's the draft. Yeah. So I always temper expectations for rookies, especially, but yeah, it's a tough one for most depth charts.
Yeah, no doubt. Last one here for me. You guys did an extra point taken team last year. I'm really excited to see how that comes together this year once Benjamin Solak is coming back from paternity leave. I wanted to be able to pitch the Chargers here to you, but the odds are too strong for them. But you here in May, what are you kind of expecting for this team in 2024? Is playoffs a real expectation for you? Or are you kind of expecting maybe like 7-10, 8-9? Where do you land right now as it currently stands with the Jim Harbaugh Chargers?
Yeah, we're actually recording. This is Solak's last week before paternity leave. So we're actually recording an extra point taken in 12 hours. So I can spoil it here because, I don't nice. We're recording. So one of my things is going to be which teams that, how there's 6 teams that make the playoffs at least that didn't make it the previous year. If you look at the last, I think 4 years since the NFL moved to the 14-team format. And so one of my takes is, all right, as of early May, here's what I'm leaning towards, because it's an exercise I do every August where I go through and I say, all right, there's got to be 6 teams that are dropping out and there's going to be 6 teams that are getting in there. Who do I like? And I do have the Chargers in there as a playoff team in 2024. I think they have some things going in their favor. One is I still believe in the quarterback. I would like to see the guy I watched the first 2 years that I was it didn't feel like a slog and you weren't it's just the vibes have not been good with this Chargers team in recent years. So I would like to see more of, hey, be creative, use your natural talents. You don't have to be robotic all the time. And I think Jim Harbaugh, if you're a Chargers fan, you're thinking Jim Harbaugh is the type of coach that can get that out of him. So, and then it's the coach. I mean, Brandon Staley, came in. There was a lot of excitement about him, but obviously we saw he was not the guy in recent years, and especially last year. And Jim Harbaugh, I mean, the guy won 70% of his games in the NFL and then won a national championship at Michigan. So I always like to look for where is there a big coach upgrade? I think this can be a pretty big coach upgrade. And then there's some regression stuff that's working in the Chargers' favor. I was looking at it used to be Football Outsiders. It's Aaron Schatz's site. They do adjusted games lost to just look at which teams were the most injured. And the Chargers offense ranked 26th on offense last year. So they were as you have watched them every week. Yeah. So it's like, all right, can you get a little bit better injury luck on offense? That would go a long way. They were 3-8 in 1-score games last year. That's another thing. Usually you finish around 500 in those. They got some bad luck there. And then a big one is if you look at sort of the projected win totals for different teams and do strength of schedule that way, they have the second easiest schedule in the NFL this season. So I was adding all those things up and being like, yeah, can they get to 10 wins? Now, as you probably know, I've been burned by the Chargers before, as many people have. So I'm not going to say this with my chest out saying, it's 100% going to happen. But to answer your question, as of now, with the right to change my mind by September 8th or whatever it is, as of May 6th, yeah, I have them as a playoff team in the AFC.
All right, there you go. So some early information for you guys that are also loyal listeners of the Extra Point Taken. So can't thank you enough for joining us, Sheil. I know Solak's going on paternity leave, but I assume the pod is still going to be happening going forward in the summer months.
Yep, we'll have Extra Point Taken twice this week with me and Solak. He'll have paternity leave. I'll be doing the Ringer NFL show with some of my other wonderful colleagues. And then I'll take a little chunk of vacation, and then we'll be back for training camp, and we'll be doing all this over again. So, yeah, that's what kind of the schedule looks like here in the next couple months.
There we go. Training camp right around the corner. Can't wait to continue to listen to the Extra Point Taken. And if you guys listening, any Eagles fans, make sure and throw them their way as well on the Philly special. So, Sheil, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, no doubt.